hush fell over the dining room the instant the younger woman strolled forward, pulled back the chair at the head of the table, and lowered herself into the seat that had belonged to the wife for years. She wore the confidence of someone certain no one would dare object, while the wife stood only steps away, gripping a folded napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her husband offered not a single word. His mother turned her gaze to the floor. Then, from the far end of the table, an elderly woman rose slowly to her feet, and the words that left her lips froze everyone in that grand house. Before we go further, if stories about loyalty, quiet strength, and second chances speak to you, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who could use these words today, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support keeps stories like this one coming. For 6 years, Clara had believed a marriage meant weathering every hardship at your partner's side. She and Marcus had wed back when neither of them owned much of anything. They lived in a cramped rented flat, shared a single aging car, and marked their first anniversary with a home-cooked meal because a restaurant was out of reach. Clara never once complained. When Marcus launched his business, she stayed up late beside him, sorting paperwork, replying to emails, and lifting his spirits every time an investor turned him down. Bit by bit, their circumstances transformed. His venture took off. Their apartment became a sprawling estate, and the humble man Clara had fallen in love with turned into a wealthy executive whose name filled headlines. Yet as Marcus's fortune expanded, the gap between him and Clara widened even quicker. At first, she told herself it was simply the weight of his workload. Then the late nights piled up. The vague meetings multiplied, and the excuses never stopped. Marcus quit asking how her day had gone. He stopped registering her exhaustion. Eventually, Clara uncovered the truth. Another woman existed, named Sophia, younger and self-assured, who had become a fixture at Marcus's corporate gatherings. Clara stumbled upon pictures of the two of them together and texts that left nothing to interpretation. Her world shattered, yet she refused to make a scene. She asked Marcus one thing only. Did their marriage still mean anything to him? He had no answer. That silence wounded her more than any admission could have. Clara remained in that mansion for a single reason: Marcus's grandmother, Eleanor. The older woman had always welcomed Clara as a true granddaughter, never as an outsider who'd married in. While everyone else celebrated Marcus's rise, Eleanor still remembered exactly who had stood by him when he had nothing to offer. She spotted Clara's sorrow long before it caught anyone else's attention. Eleanor had also been fighting her way back from a serious illness, and Clara couldn't bring herself to walk away from her. Each morning, Clara carried her breakfast up, sorted her medications, and kept her company whenever loneliness crept in. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Marcus had gathered extended family and a handful of key business partners at the estate. Clara spent her afternoon assisting the household staff, arranging fresh flowers, checking every place setting twice, and making certain Eleanor's favorite meals were ready. Some quiet part of her still hoped Marcus might finally tell her the truth. Instead, the moment guests began arriving, Sophia swept through the front entrance in a striking gown, moving as though she had always belonged there. Clara's chest tightened. Marcus welcomed Sophia without a flicker of shame, presenting her to several guests as merely someone assisting with the company. Nobody believed a word of it, but nobody spoke up either. Clara quietly retreated to the side. She had learned that fighting back publicly only deepened the sting of humiliation. When dinner was called, guests began finding their places. Clara walked toward the chair beside Marcus, the seat she had claimed for 6 straight years. Before she could sit, Sophia crossed the room, drew the chair back, and settled into it herself. Silence swallowed the room whole. Sophia met Clara's eyes with a faint, satisfied smile, then reached casually for her wine glass, as if nothing at all had occurred. Marcus glanced Clara's way, but stayed mute. That silence spoke louder than any words could. For an instant, Clara felt the floor of the mansion vanish beneath her. She stared at the chair where she'd once marked birthdays, anniversaries, and Marcus's hard-won triumphs. She recalled sitting there the day they'd landed their first major contract. She remembered Marcus squeezing her hand under the table because his nerves had gotten the better of him. She remembered every night she'd spent trusting they were building something lasting together. Now, a stranger occupied her place. She dropped her gaze and turned to leave. That was the moment Eleanor's chair screeched against the floor. The elderly woman stood with unexpected force, her face drained of color, but her eyes blazing. Every head turned her way. She fixed her stare on Sophia and pointed straight at the chair. "Stand up." Sophia's smile vanished instantly. Eleanor's voice rattled through the entire room. She reminded the guests that the chair was never merely furniture. It stood for the woman who had remained beside Marcus when he'd had nothing at all. The one who had sacrificed in silence, asking for no recognition in return. She then turned toward her grandson and demanded to know where he had been while Clara worked through the night to help build his company. Where was Sophia when Clara pawned her own jewelry to keep the business afloat during its early struggles? Where was Sophia the night Marcus's first big deal collapsed and he came home convinced he was finished? Clara had lived through every one of those moments at his side. Marcus's expression shifted. He'd let himself forget. Not because the memories had faded, but because success had made him too comfortable to hold on to them. Sophia rose to her feet at last, but Eleanor wasn't finished speaking. She told Marcus that money could purchase a larger home, luxury cars, and lavish dinners, but it could never buy back someone's dignity once he had trampled it. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. She braced for Marcus to defend himself. Instead, he crossed the room and confessed that he had been selfish, that he had mistaken success for happiness and attention for genuine love. He apologized, but forgiveness didn't come from Clara right away. She told the entire room something they all needed to hear. Forgiveness was never the same thing as forgetting. She had spent years handing over pieces of herself to hold their marriage together. She would not spend what remained of her life fighting to prove she deserved basic respect. Marcus finally recognized that the woman before him was no longer the silent wife he'd stopped noticing. She was the one who had helped him build the very life he was now gambling away. The following morning, Clara packed a single small bag and left the estate. Not because Eleanor had asked her to, and not because Marcus had insisted, but because she finally understood that putting herself first was not an act of cruelty. Months went by. Marcus entered therapy, stepped back from running the company for a time, and worked to rebuild the trust he'd shattered. He didn't expect a fast return. Instead, he learned to honor her boundaries. Eleanor stayed close to Clara throughout, urging her to build a life entirely her own. In time, Clara launched a small foundation dedicated to supporting women who had sacrificed their careers and dreams for the sake of their families. Marcus backed the foundation fully, expecting nothing in return. A year later, Clara returned to the mansion to celebrate Eleanor's birthday. The dining room looked nearly untouched by time. The flowers were arranged with the same care. The table gleamed with fine china, and there sat the very same chair. Marcus stood beside it. But this time he didn't pull it out for Sophia. He pulled it out for Clara, then stepped back. Clara looked toward Eleanor. The old woman's face broke into a smile. Clara sat down, not to reclaim territory, but because she had finally grasped something far greater. Her worth had never lived in a chair. It had never come from a husband. It had never come from a mansion. It had been hers all along. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Sometimes the strongest among us are the ones who endure quietly until the day they finally find the courage to choose themselves. And before you go, drop the words, "I choose dignity" in the comments if you believe everyone deserves respect, loyalty, and a second chance, but never at the cost of their own self-worth. Because the most powerful moment in anyone's life isn't when someone else finally chooses them. It's the moment they finally choose themselves.